How do you track earned value using Microsoft Project? I'm Tony Zink, and this is the Project Guide. Hi folks, Tony Zink here, project management author, trainer, and tool jockey, and creator of the Project Manifesto. I show people how to use tools and techniques to get better results faster on their projects, whether that means saving time, saving money, reducing risks, or just providing a more stress-free and pleasant experience for everyone involved in your project. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing or following me on this channel. And if you're not tuning in directly on my website, tonyzink.com, then you can go there to get the video for this episode and others like it. You can see the links to go check out where I hang out on social media, and you can find other goodies there too. So depending on the type of project that you're managing, you may have different performance objectives. Delivering what your customer wants is an obvious outcome, but many projects have objectives that determine how you should deliver as well. You may simply have a deadline date that you need to meet, or you may have work effort or cost targets that also need to be met. On large or complex projects, it's easy for things to get out of hand from a timeline or work effort or a cost perspective. So you typically can't afford to wait until the end of the project to determine how the project has been performing, only to find out that the project is off track and you don't have enough time left to get things back on track. Although there are multiple techniques to track the performance of a project, one or more sophisticated techniques is called earned value. This technique allows you to measure your current progress at any point along the project timeline and compare that with the progress that you should have made by that point in the project. And if your actual progress doesn't match your planned progress at that point in time, you should hopefully have enough time to recover before it's too late. Although earned value is a fairly sophisticated technique for measuring project performance, you don't need to feel intimidated by it because Microsoft Project does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, as long as you have certain things in place. I'm going to show you the 6 things that you need to have in place in order to be able to track earned value using Microsoft Project. There's a lot more to earned value management than what I have time to show you here today, but this should be enough of a foundation to get you started. So let me switch over to my computer screen and I'll get started. So here on my computer screen, I have a project schedule that I've created using Microsoft Project. And as you can see here, the name of this project is the Beachcomber EV Charging Equipment Installation Project. I work for a company called Zink Industries, and I'm a project manager who's responsible for installing some electric vehicle charging equipment for one of our customers, the Beachcomber Resort. And so the first thing that I'll point out here is basically the first prerequisite, the first thing that you should have in place in order to do earned value or measure earned value in Microsoft Project, and that is a properly structured project schedule, built from a well-defined work breakdown structure, or what I like to call a deliverables breakdown structure, following best practice standards from a scheduling perspective. So you should be able to see here that if you look carefully, I have a number of milestones outlined in my project schedule. Equipment selection and purchase complete, design and permits complete, contractor bids and selection complete, and so forth. These are milestones that represent the key deliverables that I'm responsible for delivering for my customer throughout the course of this project. And then for each one of these main deliverable milestones, I have a series of tasks that I've outlined that describe what are all the different activities that need to be completed in order to produce each one of those deliverables. And I also have my project schedule organized using summary rows. As you can see here, these bold rows on task or row number 1, row number 6, row number 11, and so forth. But really, summary rows in Microsoft Project are just for us humans who like to have a better way to organize and interpret a project schedule. They're not absolutely necessary. What really is necessary, though, to be able to track earned value in the project, though, is to have all the activities laid out and properly estimated in order to tell the scheduling engine the durations of each of these activities, as you can see here in the duration column, as well as the work effort for each one of these activities that you can see here in the work column. And so the milestones, as shown here on row 5 and row 10, those are just a means to an end. In order to do earned value tracking, you really need to have all of your tasks properly outlined and properly estimated and properly sequenced. As you can see here in the Gantt chart visually, I've sequenced these tasks to tell the scheduling engine, here's the order in which these tasks should be performed. And then it does the math to calculate where on the timeline each one of these tasks should fall. So that's the first requirement for tracking earned value properly in Microsoft Project, properly structuring your project schedule with all the activities with proper estimates against them. The second requirement in order to track earned value properly in Microsoft Project is to have resources or people assigned to each one of those tasks. So as you can see here, there's actually a couple different ways I can show this really easily. But as you can see here, I have resource names. They can be generic role-based names like I'm showing here, or they can actually be real people's names. So in this case here, I have an installation engineer assigned to one task. The next task, task number 3, I have the installation engineer also assigned. Task number 4, I have the project manager assigned, and so forth. Now, I'll also point out here that not only should you have resources assigned to each of the tasks in your project schedule, but also they should be assigned at the proper allocation or assignment units if you're using the Microsoft Project terminology. And so you can see here that the installation engineer is working full-time on the first 2 tasks, and then the next task here, task number 4, purchase charging equipment and hardware. That task has the project manager assigned to it, and they're spending 50% of their time, or I'm anticipating that they're going to spend 50% of their time working on that task. Another way that you can see that pretty easily is if you look at the duration and the work values or estimates that are entered against that task. So the duration for that task is 5 days. The estimated work effort for that task is 20 hours. And so if you're basing this on a 40-hour work week, this week-long task has 20 hours, or about half of the work week worth of work effort assigned to that task. So that's important also for tracking progress, as well as to give Microsoft Project the information that it needs to calculate the costs for this project, which is the next thing that I'll point out here. The next requirement for tracking earned value properly in Microsoft Project is to have hourly rates associated with each of the resources that you have assigned to the tasks in your project. So for example, if I go over here to the resource sheet view, you can get there in Microsoft Project by clicking the View tab and clicking the Resource Sheet button. It takes us to a view in Microsoft Project that shows us the collection of all of the resources that I'm utilizing to get things done on this project. So if you were to compare these names here, concrete contractor, electrical contractor, installation engineer, and so forth, those should look familiar to you if you were to go back and look at the Gantt chart view and look at the names of the people that are assigned to each one of these tasks. Again, you can see this in the Gantt chart. If you have your Gantt chart formatted to show people's names next to the bars in the Gantt chart. Or you can also look at the who's assigned to each task by looking at the resource names column. And there's other ways to tell which resources are assigned to which tasks as well. But moral of the story here is, if you go to the resource sheet view again, where you see the listing of all the people or resources that you're utilizing on your project, if I go over here to the standard rate column, I see here that there is a dollar figure next to each one of these resources. So the concrete contractor, I'm being told that resource is going to cost me $60 an hour. The electrical contractor is going to cost me 50 rather for the concrete contractor, 60 for the electrical contractor, $80 an hour for the installation engineer, and so forth. So the reason why we're doing this is Microsoft Project is going to use these hourly rates to calculate the respective costs for each of the tasks in the project. So if we go back to the Gantt chart view, we see here that in the cost column that I'll insert, Microsoft Project has calculated for me automatically the cost for each one of these tasks. It just simply takes the number of hours of estimated work effort and multiplies that by the hourly rate of the resource that's assigned to that task. So if you remember, the installation engineer was $80 an hour. So if you take $80 an hour times 40 hours, voila, you have $3,200 worth of cost on that task. So these are all things that are required for the scheduling engine to properly calculate earned value for us. So these are building blocks that we're putting in place, and very shortly here I'll show you how this all comes together. So we have all of our tasks outlined. We have duration and work estimates. We have resources assigned, and we have hourly rates for those resources so that Microsoft Project can calculate the cost for us for each task in the project. The next thing that we're going to need to have in place is a baseline. So when you're done with the planning stage of your project, what you, from a best practices perspective, what you're going to want to do is what we call saving a baseline in Microsoft Project. So basically what that means is you're taking a snapshot of a bunch of the data that's in your project schedule that Microsoft Project has calculated for you. So when I baseline this project, it's going to take a snapshot of all of the durations for all of these tasks. It's going to take a snapshot of all the work effort estimates for all these tasks. It's going to take a snapshot of the cost values for all these tasks, and it's also going to take a snapshot of the start and finish dates. So just to demonstrate here, I'll go up here to the Project ribbon by clicking the Project tab up at the top of my Microsoft Project window, and there is a Set Baseline button. So when I select Set Baseline, it gives me an opportunity to save a baseline for this project. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about how do you use these different baselines in Microsoft Project, but I will point out here that there are 10 in addition to the standard baseline that you would typically use for tracking variances and tracking earned value. We're going to save our baseline into that standard baseline snapshot. When I click OK, I know it was kind of anticlimactic, but basically what it just did behind the scenes was it took copies of all these duration numbers, all these work numbers, all these cost numbers, all these start dates, and all these finish dates, and it saved them off into a separate area inside of your Microsoft Project schedule that we can't see here. But it did save those off, it tucked them away for safekeeping, and then when we start tracking progress on this project, we can compare the current durations, the current work effort numbers, the current costs, the current start dates, and the current finish dates with those baselined durations, work effort numbers, cost numbers, start dates, and finish dates. And again, the scheduling engine in Microsoft Project is going to compare these two sets of information, the current or live data with the baseline snapshot numbers in order to calculate earned value performance for us. Okay. Now, once the project is underway, so now I'm moving on to requirement number 5 here for tracking earned value. Once the project is underway, we need to start tracking progress against all these tasks that we have in our project schedule. So there's a number of ways you can do this in Microsoft Project, but the way that I'm going to demonstrate here is using a method that's commonly referred to as the percentage of completion method. And so what that basically means is you're going to put a percent complete number against each of these tasks as people are working on and completing these tasks. Now, there's more to tracking progress than just simply putting a percentage of completion on a task. The reason for that is tasks, not only do we want to track the completion, but we also want to track when the task actually starts and when each task actually finishes. When you plan out your project, Microsoft Project can calculate all these forecasted start and finish dates for you for all these tasks in your schedule. Although things rarely go according to plan when you're running through a project, so it's a good idea to track the actual start dates and the actual finish dates as people are starting tasks and as people are completing their tasks. I've created a table or I've set up a table here in Microsoft Project called the tracking table. And so what this allows me to do is capture, as people are working on these tasks, it allows me to capture the actual start date and the actual finish date in addition to just simply your percent complete. Now, I said that I set up this table. This is a table that does come built into Microsoft Project. I just tweaked it a little bit. I rearranged some of the columns, and there might even be some columns in here that you don't need based on how you choose to track progress in your project. For example, I'm not going to use the physical percent complete values here to track progress, so maybe I'll just hide that from the table, and I'll just focus on the actual start, the percent complete, and the actual finish. So let's just, we'll play make-believe here, and we'll pretend that this task, the review charging equipment features and suppliers task, let's say that task started on time. So it was scheduled to start on July 9th, it looks like here. So let's go out here to July, and we'll pretend that actually started on time on July 9th. And we'll pretend that it's actually already completed, and it actually finished at the end of that week. It was scheduled to run from Monday through Friday of that week, and it actually did finish as planned. So it started on the 9th, finished on the 13th of that week. And the percent complete Microsoft Project automatically sets to 100% when you put in an actual finish date for a task. So that's kind of cool. The next task is supposed to start on the following Monday, but let's pretend that task maybe started a little bit late. It didn't get started as planned. So we'll go out here into July, and rather than it starting on the 16th, maybe it didn't start until the 18th, Wednesday of that week. And then we'll pretend that task took longer than the 5 days that were originally planned for. So we'll go out here into July, and maybe that ran until the 27th. So we have some tasks here now that have some progress. We've got two tasks that we've marked that we've put progress against. The first task started and finished on time. The second task started late and it finished late, and it took longer than we originally planned. The actual duration here, you can see, even though it was planned to be 5 days, it actually took 8 days to complete. So we have some progress here now, tracked against some of these tasks in our project. The final thing that we need to do to tell Microsoft Project, or to give the Microsoft Project all the information it needs to calculate and track earned value for us, is to supply a project status date. So we're going to pretend that we're out here at the end of this third week of the project. We're going to pretend that it's July 27th. That's when we actually physically went into our project schedule and we entered this progress. So up here on the project ribbon, we'll go to the project information dialog box by clicking the project information button. This has a place where we can supply the status date for the project. And what this basically represents is this is the last time that we entered progress into this project schedule. Or another way of saying that is the progress of this project is accurate as of this date that I'm going to supply. And so let me go out here to July and say that this was the last time that I entered progress into this project on July 27th. Okay, so now Microsoft Project has all the information that it needs to tell us the earned value performance of this project. So let me switch back to the entry table. I'm just right-clicking on the Select All button in the upper left-hand corner here, and I switch back to the entry table. This is the table that we started using when we were building and initially reviewing our project schedule. This is the typical table that you interact with, at least if you're working in the Gantt chart view in Microsoft Project. And again, I'll just point out here that we've got two tasks. We have check marks in the left-hand indicators column indicating that these tasks are complete, and it tells us what the current and since they're done, the actual duration of each one of these tasks. Let me also just show you another technique before we get into the earned value stuff. Another technique for tracking the performance of a project really easily. Since I've already entered some progress against these first two tasks in the project, let me take a look at the tracking Gantt view. This is another type of a Gantt chart view, very similar to the standard Gantt chart view, with one major difference. Rather than showing one single blue bar in the right-hand Gantt chart portion of the view, it shows us two thinner bars for each task. The lower bar, or in this case, the gray bar, shows us the baseline snapshot version of that task. In other words, that's what this task looked like before I baselined the project, or when I baselined the project. And then the upper bar, in this case, the thin blue bar, this is the current version of that task. So here we can see visually that the first task, review charging equipment features and suppliers, that task started and finished on time. But then the second task, select charging equipment supplier and hardware model, that task started late relative to our original baseline date, and it finished even later relative to our original baseline date. So this is one simpler technique that you can measure the performance on a project. But now we're not here to talk about this, we're here to talk about earned value. So let me switch back to the regular Gantt chart view, and I'm going to switch to a different table now. If I right click again on the select all button in the upper left hand corner of my task table here, I've got a pop-up here where I can switch to some of these different tables. And then down here at the bottom of that shortcut menu, there's a More Tables option that opens up a dialog box with even more tables of information that we can see. Another way to get to the same place is if you go to click on the View tab to display the View ribbon. You can click on the Tables button about halfway across, and also you have several tables here that you can pick from. And if that's not enough for you, you can click the More Tables option at the bottom of that menu. And again, that opens up the More Tables dialog box. So you'll notice here that there are 1, 2, 3 different earned value tables that I can look at. If I pick the first one and click Apply, it replaces the table that was on the left-hand side of my Gantt chart view with that earned value table. So it still shows all the tasks in the project, only it shows us some different columns of information. So I'm not going to explain to you what all these different columns mean, but and like I said, this was intended to just be kind of a foundational introduction to tracking earned value in Microsoft Project. But again, this is showing you that Microsoft Project, as long as you set up your schedule properly and you supply it with the right information, it will do the heavy lifting for you. It will do a whole bunch of earned value calculations for you automatically. So you can see here for the first couple of tasks in this project, there's a bunch of numbers that it's calculated for us automatically. The budget cost of work scheduled, or BCWS, the budget cost of work performed, or BCWP, the actual cost, the schedule variance, the cost variance, estimate at completion, budget at completion, variance at completion. There's a whole slew of earned value calculations that Microsoft Project does for you automatically. If you're curious about what any of these values represents or what it means, you can simply hover your mouse cursor over top of that column header and a little pop-up will appear giving you more information about what does that particular field or what does that column represent. And if you want even more information, while that's open, you can hit the F1 key on your computer keyboard, and it'll even open up a help window here on the right-hand side of your Microsoft Project window. And you can just type in the name of the field there, or you can answer it. You can ask a number of different questions also, and it'll answer those questions. If you're using a different version of Microsoft Project than what I'm using here, which this is the latest version of Microsoft Project Professional 2016. If you're using an older version, or at least not the absolute newest version like I have here, then it'll just give you a pop-up dialog box rather than opening up a panel on the right-hand side of your Microsoft Project screen. So that's one of the earned value tables that they supply for you. If we go back here and check another one of these tables, the earned value cost indicators table, it gives us several other pieces of earned value information that it calculated for you. And so just as an example here, the cost variance. Now, when you're using earned value in Microsoft Project to track your performance, it's converting everything into dollars and cents. And so variances that you see here, whether they're cost variances or whether they're schedule variances, they're all presented to you in terms of dollars and cents. And so in this case here, the select charging equipment supplier and hardware model task, okay, this particular task had a $3,200 budgeted cost, but because that task took longer than planned, we're over budget on that task by $1,920. It calculated that for us. And there was a 60% cost variance on that task. It even gives you a cost performance index number where it does a ratio for you. And again, if we look at the help here, it gives you it tells you that it's the ratio of the baseline cost of work performed to the actual cost of work performed. So again, it does all that math for you. So go ahead and explore these 3 earned value tables that come built into Microsoft Project by going to the More Tables dialog box and picking any one of those. Or you can create your own custom table by inserting whichever earned value fields or columns are most important to you. Finally, let me show you just one more thing here, how to do reporting in Microsoft Project based on the earned value that it's been calculating for you. As you go through your project and you enter progress, it's always updating these calculations for you. And so if you're tracking earned value and you're using that as a performance metric, then you may want to generate reports. So there is a built-in report that comes in Microsoft Project if you have one of the newer versions of Project like I have here. On the report, under the report tab, there's several different types of reports, and under the costs category, there's an earned value report that comes built in. And so you can see here that it gives you a brief description of what this report represents. Earned value management helps you to quantify the performance of a project. It compares costs and schedules to a baseline to determine if the project is on track. And then, I'm not going to read that entire thing to you, but you can see here that this report is designed to show you actual cost of work performed versus budget cost of work performed. There's another graph down here. If I scroll down a little bit further, the cost variance versus the schedule variance, and then there's even a third one down here where it's the schedule performance index versus the cost performance index. And each one of these charts, you can click on it, and this panel opens up on the right-hand side of your Microsoft Projects window. And if you'd like to, you can add or remove values and modify how these charts look and how they behave. So this is a great starting point if you want to generate earned value reports out of Microsoft Project as you're running through your project schedule. So just a few things that I'll leave you with here today. Number 1, determine the performance objectives of your project. So you may not need to use earned value to measure the performance of your project. Like I mentioned earlier on, this is typically a performance measurement method that's used on large projects or complex projects. On small projects, it may not be necessary. It might be overkill for what you're trying to accomplish on that project. You might just be able to get away with using that tracking Gantt view, or maybe by creating maybe some graphical indicators. So think about and ask your customer or ask your boss, whoever you're running your project for. Ask them and think about what's really important to you in terms of measuring the performance of a project. It may be earned value, or earned value may be overkill. Second thing, take the time to learn how to develop a detailed work breakdown structure and project schedule. That's really, really important in order to be able to track the performance of a project, pretty much regardless of the method that you're going to use, whether it's earned value or not. If you don't have all the work identified in terms of tasks in your project schedule, and if you don't have them properly estimated, then your original forecast that's going to be used as your baseline or your benchmark for performance measurements is going to be off, in which case then your performance measurements aren't going to be very indicative of your actual performance through your project. So take the time and develop a good, well thought out, detailed project schedule. Third thing that I'll leave you with here is learn how to properly track progress in your project schedule and establish a habit of doing it regularly if you're not doing so already. There's a few different methods of tracking progress in Microsoft Project. I showed you one here today, which is referred to usually as the percentage of completion method, but there's other ways of tracking progress in Microsoft Project also. There's an actual work and remaining work method, and then there's an actual work per period method. And if you're using Microsoft Project in conjunction with Project Server or Project Online, and in either one of those tools, if you're asking your team members to fill out timesheets, then that last method, the actual work per period method, is probably the tracking method or the method that you're going to be using for progress tracking on your project. So establish a habit and be regular about it. The more diligent you are about tracking progress, the more accurate your performance metrics are going to be. So thanks for tuning in and spending this time with me here today. I hope that you found these tips informational and useful and it was worth your time. Before you go, one more quick reminder. If you're not tuning in directly on my website, tonyzink.com, then you can go there to find videos like this one. You can find the links to go see where I hang out on social media. So then if you'd like to follow me, then you can get updates on upcoming webinars and new training videos like this one that I'm posting. And you can find other good stuff on my website too. So until I see you next time, go back out there and keep building great things.